Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to Word of Faith Responds. It's great to be with you today. This is Mark Morris, and we have enjoyed sharing with you this past several weeks about the conspiracy that has been going on in our church. And one of the things that we have enjoyed is just sharing with you the truth, because we know that you have heard so many lies about our church in the media. We've talked about this particular group of people that have really just made it their mission and goal to come against us, and they've used all kinds of means. And so actually the last several programs you've been hearing from Butch, a new church member with us, and Butch is back with us again, and it's great to have you, Butch, with
Hi,
us.
Mark.
And also Justin, we've been having on the program. He's not here today, but you can go back and listen. If you've missed these programs, I encourage you to go back and listen to them, because they were very clear on addressing how this conspiracy has worked and how these group of people that have come against us have used the media. And what they did was they found media reporters who would align with them and who would take their cause, and they use these media reporters to really try to further their goal against us. So one of the media reporters that has been used by this group is Mitch Weiss, and he did a series of articles involving our church last year. He's an AP reporter, and he started in February, and he did a series of articles. And one of the articles that he did was entitled "Ex-Members Say Church Uses Power Lies to Keep Grip on Kids." And this article, in essence, was about a handful of our church members, their parents, and they used the legal process to obtain, a couple of them adopted children, and they followed the protocols. They became foster parents, and all of the protocols were complied with, and they adopted children. And you see that everywhere. You see that in people in churches. You see that all over the community. People adopt children. And so we have a few people in our church that have adopted children, and they follow the protocol through Department of Social Services. And then there's a handful of other people in our church that have had custody situations in court through the legal process there, and they follow the court proceedings and complied with everything, and their cases were heard, and judges made rulings, and what happened was they ended up being awarded custody of these children. So we have a handful of people in our church who followed these processes, whether it was adoption or whether it was through the court proceeding and custody proceedings, and everything was followed exactly how it is supposed to be done through the court system. And what you have is you actually have in all of these processes, you have neutral governing agencies or judges that oversaw the process, mm-hmm. and they made their rulings, yes. And they made their orders, and there's adoption orders that were entered, and so everything was complied with. Well, all of a sudden, years after these parents have had these children in their life and followed everything they needed to do, there comes this article that attacks these people in our church. It attacks these parents in our church who really all they wanted to do was provide a loving home for children that were in need of a loving home, and they reached out, they laid down their lives. They didn't have to do that, but they wanted to, and they wanted to help children in the community and other areas. And so these children just were flourishing in our church, and still there and still flourishing and doing extremely well. But here comes this article. Mm-hmm. In the midst of all of this, in the midst of these parents enjoying these children enjoying these parents and having a wonderful life, there comes this article. And it accuses this group, and it's actually not a large group, but it accuses this little group in our church that went through these processes as doing something that was wrong. Mm-hmm. There's even just insinuations that they abuse the system. How do you, part of this theme that we see with these people that have so attacked us is that somehow our church has control over government agencies, over the court system, right. and this whole idea is absolutely so absurd, when you think about all of the law enforcement agents in the community, when you think about all of the social service workers in the community, and somehow one church actually controls this, and that's how we accomplish these adoptions, that's how we accomplish, these custody cases, that's absurd. And yet they continue to say this. They say this on social media. They try to push it through. So actually, this APR, and surprisingly enough, it's an AP reporter hooks right in with them. And that is also amazing to me, that he would go with them on this and print this story, that somehow we influence these systems. So today, we have somebody with us. Her name is Allison Dolan. She's a church member, longtime church member with us, and she's also a nurse. She's been a nurse for, is it 12 years,
12
Allison?
years. Mm-hmm.
And so she's an RN, and so she actually is mentioned in this article. And to give you a little history before she shares with us, her and her husband at that time were married, and they were in our church, and they really wanted a child, and so they decided to go through the adoption process. They actually started just being foster parents. They were approved through the Department of Social Services. They took the proper classes, and they started sending out applications for adoption, let the agencies know they were available. And so what happened next was there was a placement in their home, a foster child, a little boy, and as they went through the process, they complied with everything that you're supposed to do, the protocols and so forth, and their home was inspected. They were inspected, and everything was approved.
It's very intense.
And then all of a sudden you have a situation right before the adoption proceedings about to begin. You have her husband, Tim, left our church, and he left Allison, and he agreed to sign over his part in this to Allison and let her have this boy. And she went on and did indeed adopt a little boy. And so what you hear about now is all of a sudden Tim, her former husband, he goes to the AP, and he is quoted in this article. And he begins to say things. And remember, now this is, if you look at the timing, listen to Allison share the timing, because she knows the exact details of when he left, when they adopted, when she adopted, and then all of a sudden when you have this article. But you'll see that there's a lengthy period of time where he's quiet, he leaves the church, and he lets her adopt, signs over papers, and then all of a sudden he comes up a long time later and says, well, that child was abused there. Well, you're going to hear Allison be able to refute this so strongly. And you're going to see, as you listen, such a pattern of, you wonder, well, why didn't he say anything months and months before then when he left? But he did not. And so we want you to hear these eyewitness accounts. We want you to hear from us the truth. So I'm going to turn it over now to Allison Dolan.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Rutherford County, for listening this morning. I am so excited to be able to share truth about this story with everyone, because these AP articles we've had enough of them. And so we're going to go point by point on each one, and I'm so excited to be a part of the Word of Faith Fellowship. It has been an enriching part of my life for 27 years. I've lived here in Rutherford County for 16 years and was part of a church that was affiliated with Word of Faith for 11 years before that. So let me tell you a little bit about my story with this article. My husband and I were married in 2004. We, for several years, as many couples do, attempt to start a family, and we're not achieving that. And so we decided to look into adoption, but we know that fostering has to come first in our legal system. There's the fostering certification, and then you move into the adoptive stage. So we started in Rutherford County at the DSS in, I believe it was in 2009, and we started their MAP classes, and that's a series of 9 weekly classes that you attend. They're very intense with exercises, a lot of teaching, a lot of scenarios of what you could expect in any kind of foster situation, because we at that time were hoping to adopt a baby, but you may or may not. I mean, there are many children out there that are available, and we were open. So we went through those classes, finished that process, graduated, if you will, and then there's beyond that, there's much more that needs to be done to accomplish the foster certification, to get your foster license. That includes an extensive background check with fingerprints of your immediate family, which was done and just fine. Also, a home study that is completed by the director of the foster or adoptive department at whichever county you're being certified in, and you have to have the fire department come in, inspect your home, and then there's a lot of paperwork, as you can imagine. So, excuse me, we went through all that, and we're in the process. It's a lot of paperwork, takes time, and several months into a year had gone by, and we had not had any contact from Rutherford County as far as any possibilities of a child. And like Mark said, I'm a nurse. I've worked at the hospital in Shelby, which at the time was Cleveland Regional. It's gone through several different name changes by now. But at the time, I was there, I'm still there, and I had a lot of friends and coworkers that knew of our situation. My husband worked there at the time. We worked together. And they were really, really wanting us to start a family. And so everybody's got their input in situations like that. And they want you, to be successful in that. So they said, why don't you try another county? Why don't you try Cleveland County? And I also had the opportunity to, at the time I worked on a medical floor, but I had a very close unit right next to me that was actually the pediatric unit. And so I had a lot of contact with those pediatric nurses at the time. Now, starting in 2015, I became a permanent nurse on the pediatric and newborn mother-baby floor, which is a whole nother story. But those nurses were very integral in my life to begin putting those seeds of, why don't you try Cleveland County? So that's what we did. We called Cleveland County DSS, talked to the director of the adoption department, and she said, come and I'll have a meeting with you guys. So we went. There was a little bit of maybe a month or two had elapsed before our schedules were together to do that. We talked to her at length. She said, let me get all your information, which was done. And we said, okay. So the time goes by, and that was in the summer of 2011. And in August of 2012, we received a phone call that there was a baby that was available. This child was already in foster care, had been born, was about 2 months old, and had some other siblings that had already had their parental rights terminated. There was, the mother was in jail. There was no known father at the time of the child that I'm referring to. And so the foster family that had this baby did not feel like that he was to be theirs. So of course we jumped at the opportunity to go and see if this was our child. And we just wanted God's will. We just wanted God's will. We knew God wanted us to have a family. And so we went to visit this baby and this foster parent that had had the baby since birth. And immediately we knew, my husband, myself, my family knew that he was ours. In my heart, there was no doubt. At the moment, he was still in foster care. His parental rights had not been terminated, and there was still a lot of legal things. They call it, in the foster adoptive world, they call it legal risk. And that's basically, you take a child in a foster situation, there may or may not be a point where it comes up for the adoptive state. But we felt like God said in our hearts that this is your child. There's nothing that we can do except for pray and know that, God's going to have his way in the situation. So we took the child because of paperwork and situations to get to that point. It was about 2 weeks before he came into our home, and we took him in, and everything was perfect. Our lives were complete, and we were so grateful. He was beautiful. He was absolutely the best baby we could even imagine. So time went by. We had, through that process, of course, you have multiple DSS visits with, you have a caseworker. Then you also have people from the foster and adoptive department that can come in periodically. And so we had visits from our worker every single month, at least every month. And making sure we were going to doctor's visits, making sure that his needs were taken care of. I mean, the list is long of the things that you need to do. Because in essence, you're taking care of someone else's baby, but you're taking it as your own. So we went through that time, and right before his 12-month well check appointment, we were getting ready to go to that appointment, and my husband abandoned my son and I. And he had become very involved in reading things about vaccinations, and there's a lot that can be said about vaccinating and not vaccinating, and that's not why we're here today. But he had become very involved in that platform. And when it all came around after he left, and I said, what is going on here? Because it was abrupt. It was unexpected, very unexpected. And he said, if I cannot not vaccinate my child, I cannot be his father. And that was a very strong, shocking statement to me, because that's not a reason not to be a father or a mother. And the state of North Carolina mandates vaccination in the public school system. And I knew that if our child was going to be in North Carolina schools, which he is currently, that he was going to have his vaccinations up to date. So after the shock of it all settled, I got in contact with DSS immediately, and they were shocked as well, because there had been no indication in any of our visits through the whole 9.5 months that we had him, and they'd been seeing us at least monthly, that this was a situation. So they were totally on board for me to become the sole adoptive parent. And one of the main things that I want to point out about this article, because Tim had said, that he was very concerned about the baby and the behavior of, about what was happening. And one main point that I want to show you from the beginning is that when this situation happened, that he voluntarily, immediately removed himself from the adoptive process. We were both foster parents, both certified. We had gone through the process together, and both of our names were on his case to be his parent. But when they called him, and he said, I want to be removed, he took his name off. My name was the sole adoptive parent, and that's what we did. And it was a very favorable situation for me to have the baby. And they knew that. They had seen his growth. They had seen the bonding. They had seen the love that we had for each other, the love with my family and everyone. And there was no denying that he was supposed to be a part of our family. So that was the first point that I want you to know, is that the things in these articles, even the articles and the situations themselves, there's such vast differences between what's said. So the first thing is that he voluntarily took himself off the case. After that, I didn't hear from him. And he left in June of 2013. In June, the end of June 2014, there was a knock on my door. And it was a Rutherford County DSS worker. And he said that he had an emergent, that means needs to be responded to in 24 hours, allegation against myself. So, of course, let him in. We went through extensive questioning on this situation. Of course, it's very little unnerving when something like that shows up at your front door when you're not expecting it. And the allegation that had been emergently submitted to the Rutherford County DSS was concerning a situation that had supposedly happened 15 months prior with my son in my home. And the allegation was that a cup or bottle, I guess at that time, of milk had been withheld from him because he was crying. Well, that never happened. And it was totally ridiculous.
That was a lie.
That was a lie, a flat out lie. My son has had plenty of milk in his life. I showed the man my refrigerator is full and he gets it constantly. I mean, it was beyond ridiculous. But so we go through, the intense questioning with that. He went through our home. He met my son, who now at this time is 2. He sang for him. He talked to him. He interacted with him. He interacted with my family and myself. And the report was found to be unsubstantiated, as we expected. So that's the first. That was just shocking, because these events, if you are really, truly alarmed at some abuse, possible abuse, suspected abuse, 15 months is a long time to wait. And that was the next thing that I wanted to say. He didn't say anything at the time of that Rutherford County allegation in 2014 about any shaking or abuse, which is what's cited in this article.
Is that you're referring? Is that what Tim is actually saying in the article?
Yes.
That he had concerns about your son being shaken and abused?
Yes, it states right over here. Sorry. It states that, I'm so sorry, about, he saw his son abused by others, blasted and violently shaken. Well, friends, let me tell you, my son has never been shaken. I'm a nurse, and I can tell you I take care currently of pediatric and newborn patients. And I have taken care of pediatric patients that have had shaken baby syndrome. And there are immediate and long-term effects of that. The long-term effects include seizures, blindness, trouble hearing and seeing, cerebral palsy, and many other developmental disabilities and delays that affect every area of their lives. My son has nothing of this. He is 5 years old, almost 6. He is finishing the first grade. He, at 2.5 years old, and I know if y'all have seen my video, I shared this because it's beyond me. It's only God that does these things. At 2.5, he knew all of his states and capitals. He knew every president of the United States, which at the time I did not know. He knew them by face in order. And he has this book of presidential speeches, which I didn't know if you knew this, Mark. Your daughter introduced him to that book. Okay. And he loves it. He listens to their speeches, recites them, the little excerpts. I mean, he loves it.
So Mitch Weiss printed a lie in the article, correct?
Yes.
And I think you mentioned that there was this timeline of it. Did you hear anything from Tim when he left? You had this whole year before you get this Department of Social Services person showing up. Did you hear anything from him saying to you, "Oh, I'm really concerned about"?
No, nothing, not anything at all. And I mean, he's a wonderful child, and there's no evidence of abuse in his life. Just love, lots of excitement all the time. And I mean, these lies have got to stop. They've got to stop.
And I know her little boy, and he is just an incredible little boy. He really is one of the smartest little guys I know of. He's amazing to talk to. You think how old is he now?
He is almost 6. He'll be 6 in another month or two.
Seems like you're talking to an adult when you talk to this little boy. I don't know what his IQ is, but he is really, really smart. But one of the things that we want you to understand is that these AP articles that came out last year, we mentioned the reporter is Mitch Weiss, and we want you to know just a little bit of history. Mitch Weiss actually met with our pastors and even some other people in our church several years before these articles came out last year. And our pastor spent hours and hours with him, sharing the truth about our church. And actually at that time, it really appeared that he was really listening and hearing what we had to say. I think the relationship was a good relationship from everything that I understand. But this last series of articles in 2017, something changed. Something changed, and what we're finding is that he spent hours upon hours with all of these people that have banded together with their mission to shut our doors of our church and they're using whatever they can to do that. And they found somebody, they found a reporter, they found Mitch Weiss, who they could use to accomplish this. And so what was happening was he was spending huge amounts of time with all of these people that were really just so against our church, and he was just being inundated and flooded with all of these accusations and these lies. And then what we were experiencing was, for each article, we would get a call from him, our church would get a call, and it would be close to this deadline that he had. And he would say, okay, you know, the deadline's right here, and do you want to say anything? And there was like hardly any time. And you know, one of the things that we began to see in these articles is his use of words that were so apparent of what was really happening. He would start to use words to describe us that were so false. Let me give you a couple examples. There was an article that came out, and it's a different article than one we're referring to today. It was an article about our relationship with the church in Brazil and these false accusations that somehow our church has slaves. And so he did that article. And in that article, he refers to our church as having lieutenants. He uses that word. We have lieutenants in our church, and he talks about people from Brazil, the church in Brazil that were affiliated would come up here for pilgrimages. He's using the word pilgrimage. Okay, first of all, our church doesn't have lieutenants. We are a church. We actually have pastors. We have ministers, just like every other church. We believe in the Bible. We never use the word lieutenant. We're not an army, and you know, but he uses these words, and it's false. It is totally an untruth that this AP reporter is using against our church. Why is he doing that? If he is reporting a story, if he is presenting himself as an AP journalist, is this an editorial? I mean, he uses the word pilgrimages. We don't use that word.
Yeah.
And he goes on. I mean, he describes our church facility as a compound. We don't have a compound. It's called a church. It's called a church and a Christian school.
That's right.
I mean, he uses the word sect. He uses the word secretive. Let me tell you, you people that have been listening to this have been hearing from more people on this program than he has talked to on these AP articles.
That's right.
And you're hearing from more of us than the people that have been presenting these lies on the AP articles.
That's right.
And what you have been listening to, not only have you been listening to the truth in response to these lies, but you have been listening to testimonies, because we wanted to do both. We didn't want to just come on this program and tell you and respond and give you truth about all these lies, but we also wanted you to know who we really were. It's one thing for us to say, we didn't do that, we didn't do this, but it's another thing that you can actually know who we really are. And because of that, we got on this program and we shared with you the very core of our hearts. We actually had people that got on this program and they shared such personal details about their lives and what they went through growing up, how they were drug addicts, how they were criminals. We have been pouring our hearts out to you, people of this county, because we're not secretive, because Jesus has changed our lives and we want to share that.
That's right.
We have in our church just about every week people that come and visit our church. They come, they go, they enjoy it, and we've done that ever since we've been here. But he uses the word secretive. So contrary to the truth. And so, you know, I know we just have 2 minutes left or so, Butch, but do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to put a signature statement here. God cares about false accusations. You know, one of the 10 commandments, commandment number 9, speaks directly to the issue of false accusations. You know what it says in the book of Proverbs? Proverbs 25:18 says that false accusations are like weapons. They're like blunt instruments that are used to hurt people, and that's exactly what's happening. And our county is better than this. You know, I'm new to the county, but our county is better than this. You know, our county that had Tommy Tisdale ringing the bell saying time for school for so many years here on this station, Jim Bishop, our county is that kind of county. Our county is the kind of county that Bob Hodge, who for 40 years from Mount Vernon and called himself the prettiest person there. I don't know what that means, but that to me feels friendly and objective, and and right. And Todd Kaiser, who we sit and talk to when we come here every single day, who talked about his grandfather, Strawberry, who helped a young guy that was errant in his ways get back in church. That's the county of Rutherfordton, or Ruffton, as I've been told to say it. And so we're grateful that we're here to share the story. We believe that God's word is unshakable and truth will prevail.
That's right. And thank you, Butch. And thank you once again. We will be back here Monday at 8:30 to 9. Go to our website. It's wordoffaithfellowship.org. And you can go to radio programs and listen to more programs. And thank you. Have a great day.